The year is 1945. The United States is in the midst of a Second World War. In the scorching summer heat of the Texas Panhandle, a few dozen Italian prisoners of war slave away at the American Zinc Smeltery, located 7 miles north of Dumas, Texas. But what brought these former Italian soldiers to the Panhandle of Texas? Where did they come from? And what exactly happened during their short time here? After the end of the Civil War in 1865, the Union Army's food consumption created demand for beef in the North. The Texas Panhandle, with its open plains, proximity to cattle-driving vaquero, and cowboy culture, thrived as a leading supplier of beef during this period. Although privatization of land diminished this culture in the late 19th century, infrastructure and small communities remaining across the plains led to the development of several new towns. One of these towns, Dumas, struggled immensely in its initial decades of existence and faced plagues of grasshoppers and harsh winters, but its community's perseverance would pay off when natural gas and oil were discovered in the region in 1926. This discovery gave Dumas its first taste of major industry, when Shamrock Oil and other major companies moved in to compete for the newly uncovered resources. While the rest of America struggled through the Great Depression, Dumas expanded new civil services, exploded in population, and enjoyed a wealth of new jobs. This economic luck would seem to have no end, as the large quantities of fuel production in the area led to the opening of several more facilities in 1936, including the American Zinc Smeltery. Originally built by Illinois Zinc Company, the American Zinc Smeltery was sold to the Peru Mining Company of Illinois at the onset of World War II in Europe in September of 1939. The Peru Mining Company made leasing deals with the government when the U.S. entered the war in 1942, in which the American Zinc Company was obligated to uphold that lease when they purchased the facility in 1943. The early years of the factory proved it to be a significant job provider for Dumas, almost immediately employing over 300 workers. World War II began in 1939 with Germany's invasion of Poland and saw much success for the Third Reich. About a year later, capitalizing on Hitler's success, Mussolini began an invasion of Egypt. This back and forth culminated in a loss after a combination of blockading supply lines through naval supremacy and an American surprise landing in the West, which led to the surrounding and surrendering of 275,000 Axis soldiers. The end of the North African campaign left nearly 300,000 German and Italian prisoners of war to be divided up between the Allies, but with Russia lacking Geneva-compliant camps and England under constant siege by the Luftwaffe, the United States found itself as the destination for hundreds of thousands of POWs. While most POWs coming to America throughout the war were German, many Italians arrived after the North African campaign. These prisoners were rounded up and transported shoulder to shoulder, packed like sardines in transport trucks to the coast, where they were boarded onto repurposed civilian passenger ships to be shipped to the U.S. Upon arrival at the American shore, the POWs were forced to board passenger trains, much nicer than the boxcars typically used to transport Italian soldiers. From there, they were distributed to one of 180 main camps, and potentially could be further distributed down to one of over 500 minor camps. Much of the anti-American sentiments amongst the POWs quickly dissolved as they found themselves in better conditions as prisoners than they were as soldiers. For the first 2 years of the war, the prisoners enjoyed many freedoms, such as purchasing luxuries, communication with the public, and proper rank treatment. However, by 1944, the Italian mainland had been invaded, and sharp divisions rose between both the Axis and Allies sympathizers and the Germans and Italians. Camps became specifically designated as either German or Italian camps, and violent riots broke out whenever logistical mishaps saw the wrong allegiance end up in the wrong camp. Incidents like these notably occurred at the camp in McLeod, Texas, 100 miles southeast of Dumas, which housed a mix of Italians and Germans until late 1943, when the Italians were shipped out and replaced by even more Germans. Even though around 90% of the POWs were sympathizers of the Allies, the other 10% became more fervently anti-American, and were separated into designated fascist camps. The largest of these fascist camps resided 100 miles southwest of Dumas at an Italian POW camp in Hereford, Texas. In response to a wave of disorder and smuggling, the camp enacted retaliatory starvation periods, killing 5 Italians. The POW chapel in Hereford was later built by the Italians in honor of their dead comrades. This pattern of harsh camp retaliation would be repeated across the United States in many camps, such as firings on German POWs in Nebraska. However, in Allied sympathetic camps, conditions only improved as the voluntary Italian service units began, The ISUs were a great opportunity for the POWs that provided a wage for work in many military and civilian sector industries, such as civil work in many towns and factories contributing to the U.S. military. In the summer of 1945, one of these ISU camps was set up for the American Zinc plant in Dumas, Texas. During the summer of 1945, around 45 Italians were kept in a single large tent amongst other typical workers to work night shifts at the American Zinc plant.
Well, they worked at night. They had this big tent they lived in. They ate, slept, everything in that tent.
In the tent.
While there, the Italians were hidden almost completely from the public eye, having only minimal interactions with the other workers of the plant.
We had nothing to do with them. We couldn't visit with them. We couldn't have nothing to do with them. I never seen nothing of it, so I just seen the outside of it.
The Italian workers took on a mystic tone with the children of the plant workers, dubbed smelter rats by those who lived in town.
The only thing I can know, they called us smelter rats. And why? Because the smelter had a lot of rats. You never saw like rats out there at the smelter, so that was our name, was the smelter rats.
Guards scared the children by fabricating stories of the Italians sneaking out and running wild in the nearby town. While the war came to an end in early 1945, many of the camps still kept their POWs until early 1946, while America helped rebuild Europe. Many of the POWs sought immigration into the U.S. after the war, but strict post-war immigration policies made marrying into the country one of the few options. While their story is unknown to many, the history left behind by the prisoners of war in the Texas Panhandle will not be forgotten.